Good afternoon. Once again, my name is Derryk Burgess. I'm a special agent with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Investigations. I put brochures on your table to describe exactly what the National Intellectual Property Rights Center is and what they do. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I have an obligation to briefly go over. A little closer. There we go. To spend a few minutes, a few seconds describing what exactly the IPR Center does. What I really want to move on to is, there we go. What I want to really move on to is the local HSI offices emphasis, and also want to touch on some recent investigations, specifically one I guess it made press here recently regarding the seizure of counterfeit merchandise at the Meridian Mall. I think it happened like about a week and a half ago. So let me go through the IPR Center portion first, and also a little housekeeping. The IPR Center was organized by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Now we refer to ourselves as Homeland Security Investigation. What it is essentially a one-stop shop for all intellectual property rights and customs fraud matters. So, the focus right now is primarily on health and safety issues, and also IPR matters related to counterfeit parts associated with military applications. We consider it, we call it a three-pronged approach. Interdiction, which is primarily handled by our sister agency known as Customs and Border Protection, CBP. Investigation, which is handled by HSI. And outreach and training, which is essentially handled by the IPR Center, parceled out to the local HSI offices. Our focus, as I said, is primarily at the local level or at the HSI level is investigation. The IPR Center handles all matters regarding customs fraud investigations, but the primary emphasis right now is IPR-related matters. We're also starting to place more of an emphasis, or also start to focus on trade secrets and industrial or economic espionage. The two most important aspects of the IPR Center, in my opinion, is the outreach and training, to reach out to the local communities, local law enforcement, academic institutions, to let them know exactly what it is that we're trying to achieve and how they can assist us in our investigations. I was at a seminar overseas a while back regarding IPR matters, and one of the trademark holders said during his presentation, if your product is not being counterfeited, then maybe there's something wrong with your product. Unfortunately, the emphasis or the perception over the years were counterfeit investigations or counterfeit matters were primarily what we used to call weapons of mass purchase, designer leather goods or gym shoes or athletic jerseys. And that's an unfortunate perception, because while it's important and we address those matters, it really involves a much more broad aspect of law enforcement. As I said, a lot of your initial impression when we start to talk about IPR matters is counterfeit purses, counterfeit watches, counterfeit gym shoes. Well, that's not really what's going on out there. What we have now is we have counterfeit circuit breakers, counterfeit toothpaste, counterfeit pharmaceuticals. As I said, if it has any value, if the trademark has any cachet, the counterfeiters will reach into that particular area. Another perception is that counterfeit is associated with the local party store or somebody selling counterfeit athletic apparel around the stadiums. That's not necessarily the case. The majority of these items, or a large portion of these items, are actually sold online. As a result of that, the IPR Center began an initiative called Operation on Our Sites, where we actually went after the online retailers. It's been very successful regarding that matter, in that aspect, I'm sorry. Again, primary emphasis at this particular point in time is pharmaceuticals, electrical equipment, hazardous materials and chemicals, and I would like to add especially for the Michigan automotive parts. We can skip that. Now I want to talk about the local aspect. I'm currently assigned to the Detroit office called the Special Agent in Charge Detroit. I'm currently assigned to the Commercial Fraud Counterproliferation Group. We have approximately 9 individuals in our group who are specifically assigned to investigate commercial fraud and counterproliferation investigations, primarily associated with intellectual property rights. We also have offices at Detroit Metro Airport, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and also at Sault Ste. Marie. We also partner with local law enforcement agencies as much as we can, because the state of Michigan is divided into 2 different judicial districts, the Eastern District of Michigan and the Western District of Michigan. The Eastern District of Michigan's threshold regarding economic crimes is $250,000. The Western District's threshold is substantially less, depending on, it can range anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000. Our emphasis at this particular point in time, as I said, is on providing or going after industry that's based in the state of Michigan, which is primarily the automotive industry, and also automotive aftermarket suppliers. Anything essentially associated with automotive applications, we can exclude, like ornamental, trim, and things of that nature. But if you're talking about wheels, brake pads, windshields, airbags, which I'm going to touch on in a few seconds, those are considered health and safety issues. When you have a health and safety issue, the threshold doesn't apply. That $250,000 threshold is out the window. The U.S. Attorney's Office is obligated to take a look at it and possibly pursue criminal prosecution regarding anybody associated with that particular aspect or that particular crime. John talked to me and he says he wanted me to explain what is it that what we need at the local level, or actually at the national level. Number one, we need education and outreach. We really need to educate the local officials, whether you're talking about local law enforcement officials, local political officials, about why we are doing these types of crimes and why it's important that we pursue these types of investigations. I'm going to touch on that. We need additional resources. We need prosecutors who are dedicated and frankly interested in pursuing these types of investigations, because frankly the majority of them don't reach the threshold necessary for federal prosecution. We need local law enforcement agencies to be interested in assisting us in these investigations. Some of the trends that we've noticed is that, and this just came up the other day, Detroit is a unique port. It's a land border crossing. It's the largest land border crossing on the northern border. When you think about counterfeit merchandise, you think of it as coming from overseas sources, specifically Asian sources, China. Well, because of the emphasis and the good job that they're doing at the seaports, specifically Los Angeles, there's been a trend that was recognized, and I actually talked to one of our agents out in Los Angeles the other day, that they're starting to transship counterfeit merchandise instead of coming into our U.S. ports, transshipping the items through Canada and bringing them in through the land border crossings, whether it's Detroit, Buffalo, or Seattle. I'm going to talk briefly, and I'm moving real fast because I really want to go into some specific cases. 2 recent cases that we had come up was a counterfeit airbag case. Unfortunately, there's a tension between investigative priorities, public awareness, and also education. So I can't really go into too much detail in that case because it's an ongoing investigation. In short, a nationwide investigation led to the discovery of counterfeit airbags and that were being used as replacement parts by various auto repair shops. The investigation led to a Detroit company, a Detroit business, that was essentially doing the same thing. As a result of the investigation, 2 individuals were arrested after they were identified as being associated with a business that was installing counterfeit airbags in vehicles that were being shipped nationwide and or outside of the country. When you think of counterfeit, once again, it's the perception. When you think of counterfeit airbags, in fact, I talked to somebody earlier today, you think of it as a matter of, well, the airbag did not function. In other words, it did not provide the protection that you would expect. Well, in this particular case, it was much worse than that. Not only did the airbag actually function, but functioned in an extremely hazardous manner. Essentially what happened was the airbag would ignite into a fireball and shoot shrapnel into any potential passenger or driver of that vehicle. So not only was the airbag counterfeit, not only was it defective, but it also was a hazard in itself. That investigation is ongoing. It's nationwide. We're still trying to determine the extent of it. As I said, we can't go into detail, but it's a major investigation, and our local case agent, who's here right now, Derryk Burgess, is doing an outstanding job on that particular investigation. I also became aware of, I guess there was some media attention regarding a search warrant that we executed at the Meridian Mall within the past week and a half. I'd like to touch on that briefly. And it shows you the difference or some of the concerns or problems that we have regarding these types of investigations. Essentially, we identified a retailer over in Saginaw at one of the malls over there. Saginaw is actually in the Eastern District of Michigan. As a result of that identification, we worked with the Saginaw Police Department, and we executed what we called a plain view seizure. The dollar amount, the MSRP, essentially reached a level of about $200,000. That's below the threshold for prosecution in the Eastern District of Michigan. Now, often when we try to tell individuals what to look out for, how to not buy counterfeit merchandise, we say, go to a reputable retailer. You don't buy real or authentic merchandise out of the trunk of a car or at a party store or outside the stadium at 9 o'clock at night. This establishment was actually set up as a legitimate retailer. If you were to go in there, it looked like any type of sports apparel store that you would see at any type of mall. In short, we end up doing what's called, once again, a plain view seizure of essentially the entire store. During the course of that seizure, we were able to identify 2 other locations. Sometimes we say, it's unfortunate. Sometimes people really don't think that this is really a crime. They don't take it serious. We identified 2 other stores that this individual was associated with. Unfortunately for him, one of the stores was in Okemos, which is just inside the Western District of Michigan. He also had another store that was in Traverse City. As a result of that, we were able to obtain a search warrant for the Okemos store, Meridian Mall, and the Traverse City Mall. As a result of that operation, that search warrant, we seized an additional, it's approximately $500,000 worth of counterfeit merchandise. Now, what was the harm? Everybody says, what's the harm? It's just jerseys, it's just t-shirts. While we were doing the search warrant, people would come up to the store and ask us, what's going on? I bought from that store because I thought it was real merchandise. I thought it was authentic. They were selling it at prices that you would perceive to be authentic prices. And also, we talked to other individuals, and this has happened repeatedly when we do these search warrants. I'm glad you're there because I can't compete with that person. They're running me out of business. Because remember, they're buying that product, that counterfeit merchandise, at a substantially less amount than the people who are selling the authentic merchandise. We had a seizure at a mall over near Detroit where the individual said, we actually seized his merchandise. He says, I tried to do the right thing. I tried to sell authentic merchandise. I tried to sell the real product. But every time individuals would come to my booth to buy my product, the guy next to me selling the counterfeit merchandise would undercut me. I couldn't win, so I had to do exactly what he was doing. And that's unfortunate. Those are the type of complaints we hear all the time. As I said, right now, the biggest problem we have is the perception regarding counterfeit merchandise or the selling of counterfeit merchandise being a victimless crime. We're trying to change that perception. We're still going to address, and as I said, that the seizures at those local malls were so substantial that there's more likely than not this individual is going to be prosecuted at the federal level. But we really want to change the emphasis from gym shoes and jerseys and T-shirts to health and safety related aspects. And specifically in the state of Michigan, we really want to focus on automotive related issues. One of the hardest things we have, one of the things we have to sell to the U.S. Attorney's Office is jurisdiction. One of the ways you can obtain jurisdiction is for that trademark holder to be within that particular federal judicial district. The Detroit Three are all located within the Detroit area, so our office, our group, would conceivably have jurisdiction related to all automotive Detroit, the big three related cases. Right now, as I said, we're working on anything associated with automotive parts. As I said, airbags, windshields, brake pads, anything associated with the automotive aftermarket parts, spark plugs, wires, oil filters. As I said, we have a very dedicated group. We're aggressive, and we're really involved in pursuing these types of investigations.